Hello, my name is Daniel Freeman. I am a certified integration coach, and I'm joined here today by Galen Grigas, a licensed mental health counselor. This is Ask an Integration Specialist, where we answer live questions and submitted questions for you. So, the first thing that I'd love to delve into is, do you feel that there is a big fundamental difference between a plant medicine versus, say, a synthetically derived medicine?
That's a very interesting question. And I think there are unique properties to each, but the essence of what they do is similar. Now, people would debate this to the ends of the earth because they believe that the natural is a much more powerful impact. I would tend to lean in that direction myself, that whatever is the natural, psilocybin in particular, and I know you mentioned ketamine, but psilocybin in particular is what's considered a sentient being. In other words, it has its own intelligence, right? And we don't often think of medicine as the medicine has its own intelligence, but particularly with psilocybin, it does. So, does some of that get synthesized out, that innate, intelligence when it is being utilized as a synthetic? Perhaps. But I know that what's happening right now is we will probably have many more synthetic versions of medicine available because it can be measured and quantified and written as a prescription. So that's what's being produced right now for the psilocybin, for the MDMA, their synthetic versions. Ketamine is always been a synthetic version, and it's been around for 50 years. So the properties and what it can do are similar but different, because it's a dissociative, where some of the others are not. Does that help to answer it and kind of give some context for that?
It does. I think it's excellent. Yeah, I lean more towards natural myself as well. I appreciate the ability to, more measurably dose. So for instance, like on a microdosing protocol, I prefer something where I can see like it's exactly 200 milligrams, let's say. Because you go a little bit over those microdoses and it's not a microdose anymore. Um, but I also love being able to take something natural and the fact that it can just grow out in the fields. Yeah, I think there's definitely a mature discussion to be had, and I hope that it is had because right now what I see is that there's a there's a very big emphasis on control when it comes to synthetic substances. So, for instance, Maria Sabina going out and picking mushrooms in the field. I do believe that's the birthright of every human, that they should be allowed to just go out into the woods, and given that they know how to properly identify things, they should be able to just pick a mushroom in their backyard or out in the woods and have these experiences. And I don't think that that should be taken away from people. But thank you I think it's a great explainer for the differences, the similarities. Now, a lot of people, whenever I bring up that you do licensed ketamine ceremonies, there has been so much interest and surprise in like, how do you even become licensed to facilitate ketamine? So could you walk through the process a little bit? Because I know a lot of people are super interested in that.
Sure. Well, it's not necessarily a license to do ketamine. I'm a licensed mental health counselor.
Mm.
And so, as a licensed mental health counselor, and I want to add this because it's pretty significant, a credentialed addiction professional, which means, I'm not using this recreationally. I'm actually using it therapeutically so that if people have addictions, we're utilizing the medicine to help to overcome the addiction, to get to the root of the addiction. Once you have the license as a mental health counselor, that affords you the possibility of taking additional trainings through different institutions and different venues and different training facilities. So my initial training was just absolutely magical because I trained with the MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies. And so the MAPS training was with the premier people in the world, and they were literally, I mean, some of our trainers were from Israel, and they have just been immersed in doing this work, particularly with MDMA. But they're the correlation, the training for each of the medicines has some uniquenesses to it, but each of those are, there's so many similarities and so many places where they overlap. You know, when you know how to do a medicine, it's just what medicine are you going to be facilitating, and what properties does that medicine bring? Like, for example, MDMA brings a great sense of empathy, right? It's super heart centered. It's like an opening of the heart in a way that that experience is like none other, and you get to feel that expansiveness not only into yourself but into another and into the divine, so it's this opening. With ketamine is more of a dissociative, and I took Dr. Signe Goldman has a wonderful training program in North Carolina, and I took her training program on ketamine, and then I worked in a ketamine a clinic that did ketamine treatments both intravenously as a medical treatment, because there's a medical model that does it as an IV medicine. It's just you're getting this IV. The IV is for medicinal purposes, and it's to help particularly with depression, long held depression. I'm doing it therapeutically, which is a completely different track, which means I'm doing it as a means to therapeutically enter into the medicine journey together. I'm with the person the entire time. As the ketamine takes effect, it has a more gentle liftoff. You stay in that psycholytic dose, which means you have more access to be able to speak and to kind of articulate what's happening, share insights and awarenesses, and then gently come out of it and do the integration work. And that's the therapeutic model. And I was trained in that therapeutic model.
Something that I do find interesting with ketamine is that the experiences are much shorter than with something that would be considered a more traditional psychedelic, like a tryptamine, like mushrooms or DM, or well, DMT is a whole different story, but ayahuasca,
Yeah,
mushrooms,
that's very short.
peyote. Yeah, DMT is a different animal entirely. But ketamine,
Yes.
as opposed to mushrooms or peyote or ayahuasca, is like, about a very short, like an hour, I believe, if I remember correctly. Um, what's something also really cool that I'd love to ask about is that you've mentioned before that ketamine pretty reliably induces out of body experiences, which is not something that I've seen from other medicines. Could you talk a little bit about that, like how ketamine
Sure.
does that reliably?
Yes. And usually, like if I'm doing a ketamine assisted psychotherapy session with someone, that could be anywhere from, I set aside 3 to 4 hours because I want to set intention. I want to make sure we're kind of in alignment with why are we doing this? And it doesn't mean that it's going to go in that direction, but at least we set the intention. I leave lots of time to kind of lead them into the journey slowly because we're using the troches or the lozenges that dissolve underneath the tongue. That has a tendency to go in a little bit slower, take you out a little bit slower, and keep you in it for at least an hour and a half, maybe up to 2 hours, and then slowly come out. And the dissociative effect, and this is quite stunning for some people, is they don't ketamine is classically been used then as an anesthesia. We're using it off label as a psycholytic to take you into that kind of that non-ordinary state of consciousness. And that's really where we're going. That's the purpose of using or utilizing many of the medicines. How do we bridge ourselves into a little bit more of that non-ordinary state of consciousness where we can connect with our larger self, our divine self, our wise self. We connect with messengers, people. We connect with a spirit. We connect, and sometimes we see we're blocked, and we can see, oh, I see I'm blocked here. What do I need to do to get unblocked? And lifting out of the physical body just a bit really helps people understand how the body has almost blocked them to a certain degree because it's holding on to so much tension. It's so tight. And once they feel that slight lift out of the physical body, they go, oh my gosh, is this what peace feels like? Or, oh my goodness, I see how tight I have been. So, that goes back to the whole idea that the body keeps a score, and the body is a messenger. It's giving us some messages. It's like the dashboard on your car. If the light goes on, it says the engine light goes on. Don't keep driving, And many of us are doing that. We're not paying attention to the signals that our body is giving us. And as a result, we have dis-ease, or we feel dysregulated, right? And so by lifting out, you can go, oh, I get it. I see where that dis-ease is. I see how tight I am and how that dysregulates me.
I can definitely see that. If you pop in, you pop out of the body, you feel all of this, the peace, the looseness, and then when you come back in, you go, ah, ugh, ugh, ugh. Just loosen up a
Yeah,
little bit. Ow.
yeah, yeah.
It's funny when you're
I
in
know.
it all the time, it seems normal.
It does. It does. And then you come out and you go, oh, shoot. And I always say to people when they get to that feeling of this spaciousness and they feel that release of that physical body, the garment and it's just a garment that we wear, it's a garment of our spirit, make a vivid memory of what that feels like, make a visceral memory of how this feels to be freed from that physical body for a little bit, because we can come back to that again and again in meditation and integration and kind of capture that. But we have to have a memory, like a muscle memory, to go back to.
So I have a more niche question for you now, which is we've talked a little bit about medicine spirits just now with psilocybin. And I know that ayahuasca is traditionally associated with the ayahuasca spirit, peyote, the peyote spirit. Does ketamine have this type of energy associated with it, like a ketamine spirit, you could say?
It's really interesting. I wouldn't say that it has the spirit of whatever that person is bringing.
Mm.
So, if remember, the ketamine is a non-specific amplifier, right? So if it's non-specific amplifier and the spirit that you follow is Jesus, guess who might show up? Jesus, if the spirit that you follow is Kuan Yin, then Kuan Yin might show up. If the spirit that you follow is Mary, Mary might show up. So it really is like, what spiritual guide or teacher have you aligned yourself with? And that's a whole nother question, Daniel, because do we pick our spiritual guides or teachers, or do they pick us? What do you think?
Oh, that's actually a great question. Um, I think it's a little bit of both. I promise that's not a cop-out answer. I do believe that we are approached by different teachers in our life, and we choose. It's just like any relationship. You are approached by different people with bids for friendship to hang out, etc. And over the course of your life, you choose, hey, I'll hang out with this person. I'm not going to hang out with that person. Romantic relationship, same thing. So I do believe it works just like that, like any other relationship. Like you are approached by these teachers and you make decisions.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that sometimes when we are, when we come into this lifetime, sometimes we'll come into these soul groups, and perhaps their soul group has, maybe leaning toward Judaism, or maybe a leaning toward being Christian, or a leaning toward being Buddhist, or Eastern tradition, or leaning toward being Muslim. And so you're kind of indoctrinated to a certain degree with some of that as you come into this lifetime. And then it becomes more like, okay, who am I, and I really feel like our spiritual teachers pick us, and I feel in some way, through my dreams, particularly because that's why I write about psychedelics, dreams, and ritual and ceremony, because dreams are just as a vivid a pathway to non-ordinary states as the psychedelic realm. So is holotropic breath work. That's a wonderful way to enter into that. So is meditation. That's a wonderful way to enter into non-ordinary states. And in those non-ordinary states, our teachers come to us. And we get a chance to say, yes, I see you. I'm in tune with you and show me the way. And I think that's very valuable. In the medicine sessions, I've seen Mary, the Mother Mary, show up for a lot of people. And when she shows up, she has this beautiful blue aura around her, and she envelops them in this blue. And the blue seems to be a healing blue that takes a lot of their pain and suffering, and she absorbs it into her. And so she lifts, she is that mothering, nurturing, healing, compassionate, Mother Mary. And so that's been consistent with many people over and over again that I've journeyed with. And also Mary has come to me. So that's the other part of the question. Do teachers come because they're also associated with the person who's facilitating your ceremony? Like if I have a really strong connection to Mary and I have a really strong connection to Jesus, do I bring that into ceremony with me? And is that an influence, or is it also that person maybe has some inkling or connection, and the combination of both intensifies that and brings that about? It's very, very interesting questions to contemplate.
I normally I don't do this very often, but I think I'll share my spiritual foundation because I think that'd be a super interesting tie into this. So there's a verse in the Bible. There's I believe it's actually in all the Gospels this story appears where Jesus is asked what's the most important laws, and he gives love God, love thy neighbor. Now, one of them, this is the one in Matthew, if I'm not mistaken. He actually it's slightly different from the other ones. He says love God, and the second command is like the first, love thy neighbor. And something that so in my background and all the work I've done with plant medicine as well as the way that I grew up, God is omnipresent. Like it's it's oftentimes in plant medicine work God is referred to as source, just the source of everything, consciousness, the super consciousness. And being present in everything, it's aware of everything that happens. So naturally, if you mistreat someone, God is then aware of that mistreatment. So it clicked for me, many years ago. That just clicked for me. Oh, that's why loving your neighbor is like loving God, because every time I do something to my neighbor that hurts them, God's aware of that. And so I do believe that in life we're learning to love God and love your neighbor. And this is an interesting tie into doctrine as well that you brought up. So Jesus very famously was the most critical of Pharisees, who were the highest religious order of his time. And he gave several really, amusing. They're funny to me when I look at them. Funny examples of people being so rigid in doctrine that they hurt people. One example was the no working on the Sabbath. So Pharisees are asking about this, and he said, if somebody falls into a pit and breaks their leg and they can't get out, but it's a Sabbath, do you look at them and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's too much work. It's work to pull you out. I can't work in the Sabbath, so good luck, bye."
Mm-hmm.
Just all
Yep.
kinds of stuff like that, and it was just pointing to the fact that hey, these rules are there for a reason, but this is not an open excuse to hurt someone. Like the rule of the Sabbath is so that you can get some rest and recuperate, not so that you can abandon your neighbor who's in a pit with a broken leg. Um, so I love I that's how I look at it, and I do think it's very in alignment with how Jesus taught. There's a statement from Buddha that's very similar that talks about this stuff as well. So that's where I am.
Thich Nhat Hanh wrote a book, The Living Buddha, Living Christ, and
Mm,
he writes in that book all about the parallels between Buddha and Christ. You know
mm.
that the teachings and the parallels in their storytelling are very much the same. So wisdom is wisdom, truth is truth, right? And so that's kind of what this immersion is into, immersion into deep wisdom, the metaphysical, right? What is beyond what we can see, feel, taste, and touch, but underlies all things as that omnipresent spirit that you're speaking of so beautifully.
Thank you. Yeah, I love the use of parables as a device. I think it's so cool because it any storytelling really it puts you into someone else's shoes. It allows you to kind of think for yourself and walk yourself through it. I noticed
Hmm.
that Jesus really tended to shy away from saying things like, thou must do this and thou must not do that. A lot of things were just stories of like the guy that falls in the pit, and you're put in that scenario. You see a guy with a broken leg in a pit. What do you do? Do you pull him out or do you leave him? And it
Hmm.
was a really refreshing. It's a really refreshing approach. Yeah, so I think that's super cool. I do consider myself to have teachers, so obviously, I do take wisdom from the biblical tradition. I take wisdom from the Buddhist tradition. Um, I very much connect to the spirits of the plant medicines as teachers just because I've walked alongside them for so many years now. And you really do develop a relationship, a relationship with ayahuasca, with the mushrooms. So there's a very personal, experiential connection for me there with those teachers.
And I think in that same vein, that the medicine chooses us as well.
Mm,
Like our teachers choose us and the medicine chooses us. And that's why I think, certain medicines are better for certain people, where, I wouldn't underestimate ketamine at all and the potential of what it can do. And because I can use it legally, there's obviously some advantages to that in our culture at this point in time today. But ketamine isn't for everybody, and the same is true with some of the other, like the medicine has this tendency to reveal itself to us. And I have had dreams where the mushrooms came to me, the mushrooms were speaking to me, the mushrooms were coming, literally crawling up my arm and connecting and growing in me, like growing out of my arms. And I realized that that is because they're saying, we are your medicine. We are connected to you already in your spirit. Unfortunately, unless I'm in the Netherlands, which I like to go to the Netherlands, I can't legally do it here. Like you said, even if I wanted to, if I walked out in my backyard and I saw, a psilocybin mushroom, I could do that, but there could be some, I'd have to be very, clandestine about it. Unfortunately, I couldn't do it openly or share that. And I can't do it with anybody else because that would be then, illegal. So, and I agree with you about decriminalization of nature, 100%. And, the idea that we're still in that modality that nature somehow has to be, a criminal to use certain, parts of nature. It just doesn't make sense. I believe this is kind of going to fall to the wayside, hopefully very soon. And we have, more laws that support us in using medicines that come from nature, which technically all medicines do in some way, shape, or form anyway.
absolutely. I believe that there will be more mature discussions that happen, once that transition comes to pass, because there are pros and cons, but it's really hard to talk about the cons sometimes when you're just trying to have it be recognized at all. So I find
Yeah.
myself, I'll mention the con, but then oftentimes of talking, say, to policymakers, you have to, it's challenging. There's a way to do it. There's a way to be realistic about the cons. But there's already so much negative bias in people's heads that you've got to clear all that stuff out. before you can have that
Hmm.
nuanced discussion. I have a lighthearted question for you actually, which is after talking about the mushrooms crawling. So how did they crawl? Did they have like little stumps on the base, like little legs, or do they do like a caterpillar?
I don't know. I think it was more just kind of caterpillar-like. They didn't have
Yeah.
little stumps on their legs, but they were coming to greet me and to tell me, we are one with you. You are, we are already one. And that's really what you're looking for. You're looking for that kind of connectedness to your own medicine. And for some people, ayahuasca is their medicine, and that is the spirit of ayahuasca. Mother ayahuasca speaks to them, and heals them. And that connection with her is very powerful. And with some of the animal spirits that are connected with her with ayahuasca as well. For others, part of this could also be like a discernment, like asking, what is my medicine that can work for me? And we do muscle testing with all kinds of stuff, vitamins and muscle testing. It kind of says, is this good for my body, my mind, my spirit? And I think it's a value to ask those questions about your medicine too. I did want to share one thing though about the biases. I think the more we talk about this, the more we educate people, and education is definitely the key. I took a chance and I put in an application to teach a class to seniors. All right. And they're senior learners that meet at the College of Central Florida at CF. All right. So it had to go, and I called the class Psychedelic Dreams and Rituals, because there's so many ways where these medicines will come into play for them in their life. And it had to go through their board, and they had to get approval to teach something like this, but it went through the board, it got approval. And I taught that class to seniors. They were really surprised about the response. So when we can get our grandmothers talking about this and our grandfathers talking about this and saying, maybe there's another way that we need to look at these medicines and be a little bit more open and receptive to them, then we've kind of hit that threshold generationally where, and I wrote a little bit of an article about that. This isn't the medicine that, psychedelics aren't what your grandmother thought they were back in the day. This is what they are today. And that's what I shared with them, and they're using it for end of life distress, for dementia, for neuroplasticity, for enhancing dendrite growth in the neurotransmitters. I mean, it's like they were blown away. That there are benefits that already are researched, and I showed them videos of it happening, and and so they left that with a whole different mindset. The old museum trip about LSD, and you're going to go crazy and lose your mind, and this is going to fry your brain. Somebody said to me recently, well, isn't this going to rewire your brain? And I was like, yes, it is. It's intentional. It's not, it's going to bring more of your brain out of default mode network into, and bring more of your brain and your neurotransmitters online. It's going to do it in a way that enhances your life, enhances your cognition, enhances your creativity, enhances your connectedness. And they're like, oh, I think I thought of it in a different way, as if rewiring is something you want to avoid. We definitely don't, alcohol rewires your brain, but it only pickles it and it pickles your brain. I mean, and that's literally what they say, Oh my, I've worked in drug and alcohol treatment for years, I mean, the people were such bad alcoholics, they were pickled, their brain didn't even function. They had wet brain, and the neurocognition was so diminished. And it's something that they sell on every corner in every store. And I'm definitely not into alcohol. I've been clean and sober myself for 10 years. It does nothing but poison us. And so, but they sell the poison in every store that we walk into, and you can buy it. So, I mean, these choices are becoming more clear. They're becoming more obvious. What enhances and what brings enlightenment and attunement and awareness and cognition, and what diminishes or poisons or disintegrates our brain and our cognitive function and slows us down and makes us sick.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think the neuroplasticity aspect of plant medicines, it also speaks to, and not just plant medicines, but LSD, LSD, ketamine, all of these. I think it speaks to the importance of the spiritual aspects of working with these two. So having a good container, solid integration afterwards, preparation, because that's something that I've learned is that when your brain is in that type of state, you can absolutely rewire things, and depending on depending on what sort of habits you start to cultivate directly after the experience, when your mind is still a little bit more malleable, that can really affect the long-term changes that you'll see.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that what it does at its very best, it takes us out and helps us see a better view, a fresh perspective, a new way of seeing our lives and some of the things that have happened to us. So instead of continuing in a victim mindset, I can see that everybody in this scene, in one way, shape, or form, had their own wrestling with themselves, hating or loathing themselves, and everybody was in this trauma drama, and sometimes turns into a trauma bond together. And families sometimes bonded over their trauma. And so once you can see that from a higher level of higher perspective, the bird's eye view of that, you can go, wow, I don't want to be in that trauma drama anymore. I don't want to be in this trauma bond relationship with people in my life. That's not really what family's all about. And they see it and then they can go, I got it. I got it. I got it. I got it. And they say that. I see it now. And then that you follow that up with integration. And when I'm working with people, I ask them to do an integration ritual, something that takes it from the unmanifest realm of what happened inside of them into the manifest realm outside of them. So we might make a mind map of the experience with images and pictures and symbols and things that represented what came to them in the journey. If they see the white light, we put the white light on there. If they saw a bird, a flower, a tree, if they say photographs that come to life, if they see particular colors, we put that all on a kind of treasure map, create a visual graphic of what that looks like. That's like a really creative ritual that then brings that to life. And here is what I saw. I saw this and this and this, and this is what these symbols mean. Because it really taps us into more of and Jesus was doing this too in his teachings. He used visual metaphor story to really enhance you know, and get into people beyond just he got into their souls because he could tell a story that visually represented something meaningful to them. And he did this all the time. He was a master storyteller, master of metaphor, to really help us to deeply understand ourselves, each other, love thy neighbor as thyself. He said too, that there is not just loving others, but there is an aspect of loving the divine, loving yourself, coming into this loving, caring, deeply valuing of your own core of your being. And that's what happens again in the medicine is that they come out of the trauma, they see it from a different perspective, they find a way to be more self-forgiving, self-compassionate, self-loving, and that's the integration that then moves out into the lived experience.
That's such a good point you brought up about the loving thyself. Is that it's not it's something that I've thought about before, but it's something really clicked just now for me, which is just like the degree to which you can love your neighbor in the context of love your neighbor as thyself is the degree to which you can love yourself. And so self-hatred, self-loathing, the kind of like self-sacrifice that leaves you drained. It's very it's very much antithetical to that teaching, which is one of the most important teachings. So I love the sneaky little self-love stuck into that statement too. It really is such a great statement. It just encompasses so many things without, without telling you what to do or not to do. I love
It
it.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, if you have self-loathing, if you have self-hatred, if you cannot forgive yourself, you're stuck,
Mm.
and you're going to stay stuck in that, and you will manifest all kinds of different relationships that maybe even reinforce that for you. See, people are just mean. The people are
Mm.
just ugly. People are just nasty. Nobody's nice to each other. Why should I be nice to people? And part of that is because that was the indoctrination in the family system. Sometimes the family was mean, the family was nasty to one another, the family didn't really care for or comfort or soothe one another. Or they didn't have self-love, they had self-loathing themselves. They hated themselves, they hated their life, they hated their job, they grumble, 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 complain, complain, negative, negative, negative. And so many people were raised in that, negativity. So now what we have to do is rescript that, right? And the medicine at its very best helps us to rewrite the script and come up with a new narrative, a new story that we tell ourselves about ourselves. You know, the new story has to do with self-forgiveness, self-compassion, self-soothing, comforting, healing, and then taking that, old narrative of complaining and negativity and and denouncing our good in some ways. We can push our good away from us as well as attract it to us. We're very we're mighty manifestors, and if people are not manifesting and this is, there, it gets really dicey here because some people say, well, not everybody has the same opportunity. And it's true. Not everybody does have the same opportunity. But I have seen people who have come out of dire situations and very poor situations that were dire, and they overcame those situations. They had that spirit inside of them to rescript and start a new story, and then out of that help other people and rewrite their scripts and have a new narrative and a new story, particularly in the recovery community. There's hundreds of examples of this, where people lift themselves out of addiction and out of the darkness into the light, right? Into self-love and self-affirmation, and giving ourselves our own pat on the back, because a lot of times there's not going to be people around to pat us on the back. At the end of the day, when I'm done counseling everybody, some people may say thank you and be grateful and all that, but at the end of the day, I have to say I did my best. I gave my best. The Spirit of God was in me, helpfully, radiating out, helping this person and lifting them up. And I got to go, good job, Galen. You did good. Good job. And so we have to be our own cheerleaders too in some cases. Especially if you're working with medicine, because some people don't understand it. They're like, oh, you do that kind of work? I don't know about that. So you got to keep yourself buoyant. I've gotten a lot of negative comments because my book is psychedelics, dreams, and rituals. And they never get past this word. They're like, oh, you're into that. That's all they see. They make a judgment on that one word, and they make their mind up about me because it says psychedelic. And they think that I'm, all the things that they want to think, that they make up in their narrative and their story about people who are interested in psychedelics. And it's been quite the journey. It's not all been sunshine, roses, and rainbows and unicorns. It's been a journey to educate, a journey to bring people into a new awareness of, what the medicine has the potential to do. And it's not for everybody, but for some people, it gives them their life back, literally gives them their life back.
I really appreciate hearing this from you because as somebody that's much newer to this path of plant medicine. That's something that I've had to contend with as well, is this very painful feeling of doing so much in the plant medicine space, and sometimes it's been the opposite of not just apathy or no congratulations and having to pat myself in the back, but active pain, pushback, degradation, like all that stuff. And so when you are doing really good work and you are experiencing the opposite of praise, in fact, negative pushback, like that's when you really have to find whatever it is within yourself to keep going. So I appreciate hearing that it's something that you've been through as well, because that's been difficult. Again, I'm much newer on this path, so I experienced that in the last few years for the first time, that level of pushback, despite doing good work. Yeah. So
Yeah. And
I,
and that's kind of the story of Jesus too,
oh
He got
yeah,
a lot of pushback. So
a
that's
little,
why
yeah.
that's why he is my guide and my teacher and my brother and my way shower that I bring with me because he knows how difficult this path is. For real healing at depth and transformation, it takes this courage and bravery for us to do it.
Absolutely. I'd love to touch on something from about manifestation that you said. So I'll give my view on manifestation currently, and it's evolving always. But and then I'd love to hear what you think about it. So the concept of people manifesting certain like relationships or scenarios comes up a lot. And something that I've observed is that people tend to have repeat stimuli. So let's say that somebody met a person. That person was very aggressive, but they overlooked it, got into a relationship. It was abusive. They get out of that, they'll meet another person. That person's kind of aggressive, but there's an attraction there. Like you know what I mean? This sort of thing.
Hmm.
The repeat scenarios will play out and often, and I've seen people that are in those repeat scenarios say things like, "Why am I attracting this into my life? Why do these people keep coming to me?" My view currently, I look at it not as them being magnets for these things, but it's presenting a choice. So people might encounter, that scenario over and over again, but eventually, whenever they encounter that and they say no, I see the pattern and I'm not doing this again. That's when it changes. But what is your view on that?
I think you're right. It's all of a sudden they see the pattern.
Mm,
And honestly, because I've been doing this work for 30 years, Daniel, that's a long time. I am really, my probably one of the skills I've honed the best is seeing patterns.
mm,
So if I go like I love to really go in depth with people and hear their story, right? From birth. And some of these things can be pre-birth. We know that some of the patterns that have been absorbed or kind of manifested can happen before you're even born into this life because you're already within your mother's womb, whatever's going on with mom, whatever's going on with dad, whatever's going on in the household, all of those sight sounds, all those big feels, those are coming into you right from inception. And so, and then once you're born into the patterns, functional or dysfunctional. Now, if you're born into dysfunctional patterns, all right, and this is what I got good at really observing, you will create maladaptive behaviors in order to adjust to the dysfunction. So if every time somebody was got drunk in the house and started yelling and screaming, you might have a reaction to that, right? And the reaction might be run, or hide, um, or it could be kind of the fight, flight, fawn, faint, there's also the other F, F it just. And so those maladaptive behaviors, which really have no rational thought in them whatsoever, become maladaptive and they become ways that people begin to relate in relationships. And if we can observe those, identify those, kind of pull them out, rescript those, they don't have to continue the same pattern anymore. And the medicine is great at showing those patterns as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's also interesting that with those patterns, I do think that I've noticed that people will subconsciously create those scenarios as well. And it's not that they're doing it on purpose. It's just like for instance, I used to in the past have very bad maladaptive patterns with relationships, and I was very frustrated with the types of people that I was bringing in. And over the years, as I've looked back more and more, I see people that I ignored or opportunities that I missed or people that I actively, let's say, pursued. And I could see so clearly now, oh, I literally I literally created scenarios for myself that led to the, the unhealthy patterns. And these days it's very different for me. So the people that I might have wanted a relationship with in the past, I don't anymore. People that I
Hmm.
might have ignored in the past, I'm more likely to listen to them and get to know them. Very, very interesting. But yeah, I think it's super cool and it's really great when you heal from that. Another aspect that I'd like to ask you about is something that came up in recently. It's um, it's that sometimes when you're embroiled in trauma for a very long time, normalcy feels threatening or strange.
Hmm.
So I'd like to ask about that. That's definitely something that I'm sure you've run into. So how do you work with
Definitely.
people on this? Like when they feel like, oh, everything's great, but it feels so wrong. I don't know what to do with myself.
Yeah. And usually they came out of some chaotic background, and that chaos or drama or upheaval that was going on in the home created this like hypervigilance, right? And hypervigilance is, everything that's happening with everybody in every room of the house, and that's the way you stay safe. Because you have to be hypervigilant. And so when things are normalized and there's nothing to be hypervigilant about, they consciously or unconsciously create a situation where they have to be hypervigilant again. And it's just like an insidious kind of loop of suffering. And, there's suffering that is legitimate suffering, and we are going to suffer in this lifetime. And many people have suffered. But there's useless, unnecessary suffering, and that useless, unnecessary suffering is something that we can avoid or we can mitigate to a certain degree. That's a whole show in itself. We have to do a show just on suffering and how part of it can be, an edge of growth and maturing, emotional, mental, spiritual maturing, and part of it is just useless, unnecessary suffering. So I think we should talk about that on the next
Oh
show.
yeah, just the core of Buddhist philosophy and a little thing.
That's right. Life is suffering. That's right.
So the whole
We're going to go
foundation.
right. That's right. We're going to go into it, Daniel,
Yeah.
because if we go into it, we're not avoiding it. And see, that's the thing that most people are doing, using all these other doom scrolling, alcohol, cannabis, some of them not so healthy uses. I mean, there's healthy use of some of the cannabis medicine, and some people use it too much. It can be abused just like anything else. It can, so, and alcohol, particularly the numb out, they're doing maladaptive behaviors in order to avoid suffering. But avoiding suffering is only going to prolong the suffering and deepen it. And that's the piece that we have to really kind of dive into and understand. That's the monster that shows up sometimes in the journey. And you're like, I'm not going to run from this monster again. I've been running from this monster my entire life. I'm going to jump in its mouth, or I'm going to jump in its eye. And I'm just going to let myself be, I'm going to immerse myself into this monster once and for all. I'm not running anymore. And that's a turning point.
Oh, that's a great topic for next time. So thank you very much. This has been Ask an Integration Specialist with Daniel Freeman and Galen Grigas, licensed mental health counselor and certified addiction counselor or addiction specialist. So I hope to see you next time. And yeah, it's been great. Thank you.
Awesome, Daniel. Thank you.